Shalom, and welcome to another episode of the School of Innovation. I'm your host, Yaniv and my guest today is Kostas Tserpes. Kostas is an assistant professor in the Department of Informatics and Telematics at Harokopio University of Athens. He holds a PhD in the area of distributed systems from the National Technical University of Athens School of Electrical and Computer Engineering. His research interests revolve around distributed systems, software and service engineering for data analytics and AI. He has been involved in several EU and national funded projects, leading research for solving issues related to scalability, interoperability, fault tolerance, and extensibility in application domains such as multimedia, e-governance, post-production, finance, e-health, and others. Kostas has served as the scientific or general coordinator in several ICT projects such as Positive Spaces, Socios, Consensus, Fortissimo, and Basmati, and the principal investigator for Harokopio University of Athens in the projects Accordion, Teaching, Collabs, Master, and SmartShip. Here's my chat with Kostas. Hey Kostas, welcome to the show.
Hi Yaniv. I'm very happy to be in the show, and I'm definitely honored to be in the show and having this conversation with you.
So listen, we have known each other for 10 years now. 10 years ago, the year was 2010. I was a young researcher at IBM Research, and you were a young and handsome professor at NTUA. And we met around this project called Socios, which stands for Social Internet of Services, right?
That's right. That's the short and more accurate, I guess, title.
Okay. In research, in preparation for this interview, I actually Googled Socios, and I wanted to see if there was any, still remnants of online information about the project, because it's been 10 years, right?
Right.
And I found a page on the European Commission website that has all the details about the project.
Yeah. For some reason, they decided to do that, apparently because all the partners, didn't. So, not only in Socios, but in all the European Commission projects. Yeah, and they do have this for this website, and every project is reported there. The basic information is there.
Exactly. So I'm gonna link that website on the show notes. But I thought we would use this as sort of a point of reference. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's astonishing the amount of information that's on this page. But I'm just going to start with the project description and maybe let you take it from there. So it says, Socios will pave the way for building qualitative, functional, and usable business applications, exploiting the user-created content, or UCC, and the social graph of users in social networks.
One important thing that I need to add here is that, most of those things are written, were written in the beginning by me at least. So, and my English are poor in general. So I remember many times, you being wondering what I'm trying to say, or why do I have this pompous style of writing? But it was only my inability to actually write in a more
colloquial way. Yeah, that's what I love about you, and I love the way that this is written because it provokes emotion. And I think, when you think about a project in the European Commission, it's not something like most people get excited about. It's not typically very sexy, but I think your way of describing this in a more heroic way, I like it. Anyway, back to the point. So the start.
Sorry, I need to add one more detail here.
Go ahead, please.
The full title is Exploiting Social Networks for Building the Future Internet of Services. And one of your first remarks was that, exploiting probably has a kind of negative connotation. So probably you would like to use something like leverage or something like that. I really remember this.
Yeah, I think whenever I read, and the word exploit is used quite a bit actually in communication, which
Right.
is
Yes.
I find that kind of strange because every time I read that word, I cringe a little, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like exploiting. We're not exploiting. We're leveraging. We're gonna leverage the
Exactly.
information. So the project started in September. Well, at least it says here that the project started in September 2010. I joined IBM on October 3rd, I think,
Hmm.
2010. This was the first and I think biggest project I was part of at IBM Research. But you,
Hmm.
I want to know what your role was and tell me the backstory of how this project came to be. Because when I got
Hmm.
into it, it was like running. So, what was the
Yes.
backstory?
Okay. So maybe to give a bit of a context in general, the European Commission is funding research, so they're saying that they're having some topics that they would like to, and not only European, also, but also Israeli and some other countries can also participate. Can propose their ideas for related to these topics
Hmm.
for research, and there's a process of evaluation, and if they get accepted, then the project starts. So this happened, of course, with Socios. But before that, well, our group in NTUA, and by the way, these are collaborative projects, so you have to collaborate with others and make consortia, create consortia, and participate in this kind of competitive process. So NTUA was actually very active in that, and not only NTUA, but NTUA. I was involved in NTUA, so I knew about that. So before that, we had, as a group, we had made a decision about 2007, perhaps, or 2008.
Hmm.
We made a decision to. We were in cloud computing a lot. We were doing, well, at that time was grid computing, turning to cloud computing, distributed systems in general. So at that point, we decided to make a turn and try to invest a bit uh, on more social analytics related topics, because
Hmm.
they seem to be very relevant and hot at the time. So we started with this idea of working on in virtual worlds, try to immerse people and whole communities in virtual worlds, like Second Life, that was kind of big at the time, and another project that Sun once was running at the time before it was acquired by Oracle, called Wonderland, Project Wonderland, I think. So they were kind of big, and there was people were actually using them, and we thought that, okay, if we let these people in the communities immerse in these projects, maybe we can actually make something out of it that could even have a commercial value, or it could even have perhaps even a social community value to someone. And we started this project with IBM. That project was called Positive Spaces. It was also funded by the European Commission. But when the project started, we realized that perhaps this thing really, became really thin, very quickly. So virtual worlds was not really relevant, and that happened really quickly. Also,
Hmm.
Sun at the time was acquired by Oracle, and they dropped the Project Wonderland thing. So we said, okay, what would be interesting? And IBM pushed a lot towards the social analytics, which is something that we liked as well. So we started shifting towards that direction, in a kind of rapid pace, and we were actually investing
Hmm.
in social analytics. And the next idea that came to our minds was related to to try to see whether there are these social media platforms that whether we can leverage or exploit social media platforms, then the content that the users will generate there, in a way that would add value to businesses or to communities and so on. And what we thought that we should do is to provide all these kind of tools that the communities would need or the businesses would need, like social analytics, or even actions within the social media platforms. Provide these things as a service, right? That was
Hmm.
the idea, and a kind of sci-fi idea still, but it was research anyway. So on one hand, we wanted to be able to tap into the social media platforms and being able to get user-created content and provide content ourselves, and use this content to do our analysis in a kind of middle level, a middleware, let's say, and then expose this kind of analysis and all the services that we could provide as a service. So this is the kind of idea of, this is the Internet of Service part in the Socios, in the title. So this is how the idea started. We wrote the proposal again with IBM because we were working a lot back then, and we got funded. We learned that we got funded back in 2009, mid 2009 perhaps, and then it started on September 1st. Okay. And then on October, IBM presented the new member of their team, and that was you. So, and the kind of know-how and the kind of attitude that we brought, that was really different, and it made a difference to the project. I have to say that.
Yeah. Let's take a step back for a second. Okay. So NTUA and IBM recognized sort of this trend happening in social networks and analytics, and it sort of seemed to be a good fit because, so I joined IBM's social technologies group. So obviously IBM Research was into social technologies, and then NTUA was trying to explore this new sort of space. Okay, so there was the agendas were complementing each other. First of all, what was your role in the project?
Okay. Well, in the proposal phase, I was the one who was trying to coordinate all the effort to put together the proposal. And in the project phase, I was the acting coordinator. So I was working in the group of Professor Dora Varvariou, who is a professor in NTUA, and I was the acting coordinator. But I was very much involved in also the technical parts, not trying to do only high-level management, which I don't think that was needed anyway. But it was more involved into technical and try to. My main concern was to see that all partners are sharing the same vision, because that was again, it was a kind of sci-fi idea at the time. Well, everybody had a different view of what this proposal was about. So my constant concern was to see that there's a certain overlap between the visions that everybody's sharing and their expectations from the project. So I had to, sometimes even go deep to understand exactly what are the things that they were interested in, what are the technologies that they would like to use and to develop and so on, and try to see whether there were any overlaps, as I mentioned earlier. So that was my role, my formal and it's an informal role in this project.
I want to dig into that. Okay. So going back to the website, it lists 8 participants in the project. So that's the consortium, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you've got 8 different partners. So there's the Catholic University of in Louvain.
Right.
There's Deutsche Welle. There's Cognium Systems from France. There's you guys. There's another partner from Greece, a film production and equipment company. Okay.
Yes.
That I don't remember. There's Google Ireland. There's the University of Haifa, and there's IBM Israel.
Right. Exactly.
So that's a lot. Like 8 participants from 8 major organizations. I'm curious to know, how did you put this consortium together, and how did you what sort of tactics did you use to manage it?
Let me start about how we put together this consortium.
Yeah,
and then and then how we try to manage it. So one thing is that the ones that came up with the idea was us and IBM Israel. So they were the people that were working on a daily basis, and we came up with this idea and we decided to go ahead, right? And so these are the 2 main partners, and we're sharing the same vision, and we were also had some complementary technologies, or we were trying to implement complementary technology. So that was easy. The thing is that when you set up this consortia, the first thing that you need to know is to have a basic idea of what you want to do, right? So and then to try to break it into small pieces and see what you need. A very, very important thing, though, is that before breaking it into pieces, perhaps, is to see where this kind of idea and research and technology that you want to develop is going to be applied. Because you need to provide, in this kind of projects, you need to provide some sort of proof of concept that your technology, the developed technology in the project, has been developed because it meets certain needs, mainly commercial needs, and that eventually it succeeds into meeting these needs. So this has to be there has to be evidence for that, and the way to do it is to actually have in your consortium partners that provide you with these requirements, with these business requirements, and at the end will evaluate your work in their own line of business. So we came up with two, as we call them, use cases, two application domains that we will build proof of concept tools for them. One was in what we called citizen journalism, and the idea that you get citizens running around and taking pictures, posting them on Twitter and so on, and reporting events that happened in the world, and try to put them together and create a kind of a news article, well, in quotes, of course, and provide it to the world, or use it as a source for a news article. And the partner that was the one that we had access to, we could talk to, or we decided to talk to, was Deutsche Welle. Deutsche Welle is the German news agency, and they're really big. So we talked to them, and there was a group that felt that this is important and interesting, and that they had things to contribute, like explaining to us what are the requirements. They talked to us about the validity and the credibility of the information and how this should be assessed and so on. And this is how Deutsche Welle came. And then we had this company, the V. Katsouphis V. Pietra, the film production company called Steffi. Okay. Because we came up with the idea that probably that could be used for use cases where they want to create commercials and they want to somehow find the right actors or the right extras, or find the right locations for their commercials or their films or whatever, but mainly commercials. And what we were suggesting is that maybe you can actually crowdsource this task.
The talent.
The agency, the talent. Yes, this kind of agencies. And we were trying to circumvent this kind of middleman in this case and directly take them to the crowd. And this was very interesting use case, which was tested during the project. And it turned up to actually even provide a good result, not only in terms of quality, in terms of actually finding the right location or finding the right people, but also finding them cheaper than what they would do otherwise. So we had these two partners brought in for to cover these particular use cases. And then there were certain requirements that we always have, like, for instance, okay, we need to build a platform. All right, and every partner is going to build their own bit. Who is going to do the integration? Who is the one who has the software skills and the capacity to actually integrate this thing into a single platform and have a commercial need for that, right? Not only do it just for do it, but because they actually can integrate it in their own tools, this platform, or use it for their own businesses. And looking into our own social network, we found this French company called Cognium, that they were doing this kind of work at the time. They were interested in building these kind of platforms, and because they commercially interested, and this is how we brought them in. Then we wanted a partner that could help us a bit in the technical part, but also there were some very detailed things, but also in the exploitation and dissemination and communication of a project, because this is kind of important thing in these kind of projects. You need to provide again evidence that there's going to be an impact coming out of this work, right? And in order to do that, you need to have a communication plan, of course, that, the way that communication is about, well, in the European Commission jargon at least, communication is about letting people know about your project. And then you have dissemination and exploitation, which is dissemination is letting people know about the results of your project so they can use them afterwards, perhaps, or be part of them. And then the exploitation is about the commercialization plan. How are you going to make money or some sort of value, even maybe social value, I don't know, out of the results of this project. So we needed someone to guide us and help us towards that direction, and that was ATC. In terms of specific contributions, at some point we realized that we need someone to be able to provide us technologies and know-how and the theory behind that in the value of information, how the information is evaluated under different circumstances, because this is what it's all about. Okay, what's going to cost to the people to provide information about the right actor or the right location? So you need to be able to evaluate that and make sure that it's actually is worth it, right? So it seemed that, and we learned that through IBM Israel, that there was a group in the University of Haifa working exactly in this topic. So this is how we invited them. And then we needed, not necessarily needed, but we found interesting in some discussions that we had with Google at the time. They were interested in taking part in this kind of work. And we thought that, okay, they're really big players. Maybe they have an actual, commercial value into that. And so we asked them to join, and they eventually joined. And there was always the standard problem that there were all these problems related to privacy issues. And, you cannot just take the data of someone on social
legal
media.
issues,
Legal issues, of course, legal issues, because, for instance, the social media platforms at that time started to become very much protective of the content that they had. And there were also, ethical, let's say, issues. Okay, you're getting the data and you're using them how, for what reason? And to cover that, we contacted a partner that we had worked with in the past in this Catholic University. I don't know how to pronounce it. KU Leuven, all right? KU Leuven, we are contacting them. They were working essentially they were lawyers doing interdisciplinary research in computer science and the legal, let's say, science. So they were the right people for that. And this is how the whole, all the gaps were filled. And this is how this consortium was created. Now, managing it, that was a big story. And there were certain
daunting
problems
task. Yeah, daunting task. 8 different partners, not small ones, and you're in the middle of all of this. So, and I remember you going through it. So, tell me a little bit about like what was on your mind at that time.
Yeah, well, what was in my mind basically was, and I kind of left a hint earlier about that, is that managing the consortium, high-level management, that made not much sense, because I come from ICCS, right? NTUA. NTUA is a kind of prestigious and big university in Greece, but it's nothing compared to IBM and Google, right? It's nothing. So there were really big partners being involved, and the ICCS really, we had a real issue to try to tell them what to do. And that was not eventually, this is what a kind of strategic decision that we made, that this is not what we should do. We should not try to tell them what to do and try to drive them around and say, okay, don't do that, you should be doing this and that. But instead, what we were trying to do is to see what is that Google wanted out of this project, what it was IBM, which was the major stakeholder, want to make out of this project, and try to find common ground to work, rather than try to force our own plans or the actual plan of the project on them. And that was the kind of work that I was mostly doing, trying to find the common space, not between only these two, but between every single partner being involved. Um, in order to achieve that, you had to go along with the people, of course, right?
Yeah.
It was, of course, the company strategies, but there are always people doing the job. So having good relationships with the people, that was, I think, the number one thing. And I was very lucky that I found you and some other people, of course, in this project that, you really, I think that you were like-minded. You thought that, the main thing is that we're okay between us and that no one is exposed, everybody's happy, and we're having actually a good time doing that.
Mm-hmm.
There were times that it seems that everything is going to end up into a halt, especially because each company had their own strategies and their own policies, and especially these two companies, they're really big, right? So they even had their own concerns about how people seeing them working one with one another, and things that were kind of crazy to me. I mean, I never thought about those things, and there were times that we were saying, okay, this is most likely going to end up into stopping the project or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that when you were talking to people and when you were trying to see what the people want, not necessarily the companies, and how the company policy could be satisfied, but at the same time do some sort of work. It seems that this worked, and I mean, I have to repeat that because it was not only I was trying to do that, but it would never succeed if it weren't people like you, right? I remember many times people like you, Yaniv, saying that we have this problem with this kind of activity that you want to do, and the the legal department is very much concerned, and so on. So at the end of the day, you spend more time into solving this issue, making sure that everything's going to be okay for the legal department, and at the same time continue working. So it was more time spent on your side, basically, in order to do that. You were spending your own time to do that, and it was you and a few more people being involved that were actually doing that. And this is how this project moved on and eventually finished, providing some results, and even more providing know-how and experience to the members that were involved to move ahead, to do something even better or even more, let's say.
So I'm always interested in kind of the battle-tested tactics of doing that, like building. You mentioned building relationships, right? So I'm
Mhm.
curious if you could give like an example of something that worked and maybe that you tried and worked, and something that didn't.
Okay, so well, one of the things that we've tried, and it seems that it worked, is that we tried to have more face-to-face meetings, so
Mhm.
people meeting to one another.
Yeah, because there was a
And
lot of phone calls, right? I remember there
there
was
were
so
also
many phone.
many phone calls, of course, and that was another, let's say, attempt. And I remember I was always saying that we need to to have these phone calls every week, even if it's just to say hi.
Hmm.
And sometimes we actually, spending like 10 minutes in the call, and that was all. But most of the time, that was not the case. So these phone calls were very beneficial in actually bringing people together and having them talk to one another. The physical meetings also were another thing, and try to make these physical meetings also enjoyable, or even during the meeting, trying to ensure that everybody's involved by even forcing in a way people to talk to one another and so on. I remember at least one case that didn't work, maybe two,
Hmm.
and where I asked my one of my colleagues to go and have this discussion. We had organized these meetings, these physical meetings before. So during a plenary meeting, there was a session where ICCS would talk to Google,
Hmm.
Google would talk to, and so on, and that didn't work well. I remember one of my colleagues coming back and telling me, "Oh, this." this guy, he's actually trying to have me do all the work, and he's not going to do anything. And so most likely that was a misunderstanding, really.
Hmm?
So, but you had to always have a kind of mediator. Not a good idea to have people talking to one another, because if a misunderstanding happens, then in order to fix it, you need huge amounts of energy.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I wanna talk about the outcomes.
So one of the tangible things that came out of this project was a cross social media platform API. Okay, but it was very difficult to maintain because the APIs in the underlying social media platforms were changing and so on. So we tried to maintain it for quite a while, but that was kind of the thing that you could actually show to someone. Another thing was the tools that we had created for Steffi and Deutsche Welle, which again, they're nice to just to showcase the things that we have done, the YouTube videos and stuff like that you can showcase those, and the software, of course. But I think the important things that came out of this project were know-how about social analytics, about social media platforms, about the use of user-generated content, the use of other people's data, and that was kind of very important thing, at least to the academic, let's say, partners, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was a kind of the era that I started working on social analytics, and it made an actually impact in my career.
Hmm?
So it actually changed my whole life as well. I guess that's the same for other partners as well that are more into the research and academic, let's say, more side.
Yeah.
Now, there was one tool that was created, and they're actually selling them from ATC and Deutsche Welle. They worked together. They worked after the project more in
Hmm?
order to develop a tool for assessing the validity or the credibility of information provided on the web.
Wow.
So there were a lot of social analytics going on there, of course,
Yeah.
but they eventually came up with a tool, and it's a commercial tool. They're still providing them that to the market.
This was almost like a social experiment. You put
Mm.
8 participants from, different mindsets, different countries, different technologies, everything's different, into
Right.
like one melting pot. If you
Mhm.
haven't front loaded the work in terms of like writing the proposal and thinking how the pieces come together, you end up with like a bad soup. But your soup, our soup, tasted quite nice because of
Mm.
all the work that you've done before that. And I think there are a lot of nuances that we haven't discussed. So maybe we'll do another episode if you're all right with that.
Of course, of course, of course.
Okay. So if people want to know more about you and what you do, and maybe even reach out to you, what would be the best way?
Well, the best way and the easiest way is to write me an email. My email is my last name at hua.gr. HUA is it stands for Harokopio University of Athens. So it's a public university. It's not NTUA. It's another smaller university in Athens.
Hmm?
This is where I'm a faculty member there now. So whoever wants to contact me should feel free to do that.
I'll put all that
Mhm.
in the show notes. What are you working on today?
Today, okay, the emphasis that I'm putting is on AI model architectures and the issues related to the how would you deploy an AI model if you had certain computational constraints? How would you achieve the expected quality of service if those constraints
Hmm?
under these constraints? Sorry.
Right.
So the constraints are provided by the infrastructure mainly. Like
Mhm.
we're talking now about edge computing and stuff like that. So
Mm.
you get all this uh, this heterogeneous infrastructure to run things like AI models, and how do you do that in a efficient and effective way?
Kostas, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very, very much, Yaniv.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Kostas Tserpes. If you don't want to miss the next episode, just search for the School of Innovation on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe. Also, don't be shy and leave a review. Reviews make it easier for awesome people like yourself to find this podcast. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.